Class 9 colleagues of Jordan and ask if there are any apologies. No apologies. Okay, declarations of interest. Sorry,
Councillor Mickle.
Yep, okay. Anyone else? Councillor Hughes? Oh no, is this coming? Right,
yeah,
okay.
I'm not sure if Councillor Coombs is just running late, so.
Well, okay, she's late. Okay, thanks for that.
We'll now move to declarations of interest. None. Minute of the meeting of the Executive on the 25th of September, pages 4 to 12, anything on that? If not,
Happy to move them as a
okay, thanks for that. Yep. Rolling action log 13 to 16. Anything on that? No, and we'll move on. Fees and charges, pages 17 to 51. Okay, Danny Kearney, please.
Okay, thanks, Chair. This follows our continuation at last council meeting where members asked to take the report as for further consideration. The report considered by the council provided an appendix to this report. A briefing was also held for elected members on the 9th of October on the contents of the report. It's a fairly lengthy report with appendices, but I'll be brief and summarise again the key points. At February 2018 budget meeting, it was agreed that a review of fees and charges would be carried out to provide information on benchmarking and to present recommendations on developing a consistent approach to charging and concessions, taking into account the poverty strategy. The main recommendation to ensure an improved level of consistency is to have a corporate and charging and concessions policy, and the policy is recommended at Appendix 1 of the original report. It provides a rationale and a framework to ensure a consistent approach to charging and concessions, and it's in line with best practice and other councils. In terms of the key aspects of the policy, it creates a charging structure which looks at various methodologies for charging, which includes commercial, full cost recovery, subsidised or free, and it provides a clear passport for accessing concessions largely tied to income related state benefits, and provides for that level of charge to be free for those on the income related benefits. The policy would apply to all new charges, with existing charges and concessions reviewed in line with the policy as part of the budget process for 1920. However, there is a small example in the report with regard to the Council approving a charge for providing a passport checking service on behalf of the Home Office. The charge is set based on full cost recovery with a concession to any applicant on means tested benefits. With regard to benchmarking, it is a factor when existing charges are reviewed and new charges are considered. As part of this report, information has been provided from an exercise conducted by PricewaterhouseCoopers in 2017 across 20-odd councils. As always, there are caveats to this benchmarking information, as charges can vary for a variety of reasons, but it's a useful process to establish the reasonableness of council charges. In conclusion, with one small exception, the report doesn't include specific recommendations on setting, revising, changing or creating new fees and charges, but rather presents a framework of principles for reviewing charges and concessions on an annual basis and to help inform decisions and justify charging. Ask the Executive to note the report and agree the recommendations at Section 2.
Thanks for that, Councillor Middleton.
Thank you, Convener. We've already sort of run this particular item previously, but just to say that this is a framework for the council to work within. It's something that has been recommended, particularly by our auditors as part of our financial due diligence. of the council and working towards a medium-term financial plan. It does not set charges today. We're not asked to change or set charges today. All we're asked to do is give you a framework that's linked to our corporate priorities and to our property strategy, and that will then determine how we go forward. There's still the ability for members to set aside any particular charges should they wish to do so, as long as we can evidence the reason for doing so, and that would be left entirely up to members, with final decisions obviously as part of the budget setting process. I'm happy to move the report.
Councillor Alexander.
Happy to say.
Councillor Valentines. Any comments or questions? Councillor Nimmo.
Having listened to what the council leaders just said, convener, I think it's important that any new fees or charges are agreed by full council, whether it's part of the budget process or otherwise. I still have issues with some of the information contained in the report, one of them being railway stations, which I mentioned at the last meeting. There was some debate at a recent Polmont Community Council meeting regarding the parking situation at Polmont Railway Station, and they're certainly not up for having any further charges or anything levied on the car park there, but I recognise that it's a council-wide issue and there's more than just Polmont Railway Station in question here, but I'm sure we'll have further discussions regarding that in the future as part of the budget process. Can
Just before I go, there's not a motion or an amendment, so the only thing I would say about it is I have real concerns about some of the suggestions in here in relation to charging, but I take the point that these are the council makes and we'll make decisions here, but one thing is full cost recovery. Council aims to recover the costs of providing the service to those who use it. I think there will be a long time spent debating that particular issue. That would be a real concern. So there's no motion, there's no amendment. Mr. Alexander, you want to come in?
Yes, as you've rightly said, convener, there's no changes to the rates that are set at this point in time. What we do have now is a framework which is very welcome, because what we've seen in the past, recent past like that, is charges introduced, for example, towards the cost of the environmental health, pest control, for example, where a person on benefit pays the same as someone in an affluent area in a big house and with a large income, and that has to be fundamentally wrong. I would have suggested £45 per call. What we have is something that is already full cost recovery and has been for the last few years. So I think that the issues that we discussed in relation to the framework, I think we'll see a benefit, particularly those who are low paid, particularly those at the bottom end of the financial ladder, and that I would have thought would have been highly welcome.
Thanks for that. We came a wee bit of leeway there, but that's fine. It's just when we're on that subject, Mr. Alexander, I think I'll make something clear. Yeah, just before I close the debate. Chair's entitled to speak twice, Mr. Alexander. The fourth point, Mr. Alexander, can I just say to you very calmly, very clearly, I'm going to speak. I hope we're not the usual rhetoric.
Well, I hope you're not going to.
That's fine, thanks, Mr. Alexander. On item 419, on item 419, let me make it clear. The proposals that came up before, increasing childcare charges, introduce school meal charges for special schools, increase school meal charges, increase charges for special uplifts, introduce charge for garden waste, introduce parking charges at all railway stations. Labour's no signing up for that, so that's all I'm saying. There's not been an amendment. Can we move forward?
Convener.
Do you want to wind up? There's no movement, motion, or amendment.
I do still have the opportunity.
Well, I'm going to let you do that, but I should point out you've already spoken. Right, where you go? Come on.
Absolutely. Just Can I just, again, on that particular issue, highlight that 419, these were still officer suggestions. Those were suggestions that came forward last year and were rejected. I said that at full council and I've said it again.
So you'll join me in saying that they're not going to accept them?
Councillor Goldie, we haven't seen your proposals come forward, so...
I've just said you're not going to, you said you agree with me on that, so you've seen your proposals. Mr Alexander,
this needs to all be considered in the round of the budget discussions, and when we see Labour's alternative budget proposals and see your participation in the budget working group, then we'll be able to make some further comment around your thoughts on the budget.
But you can't come back, I understand that. Right, okay, thanks for that. So we'll now move to item 6, diversity action plan. This is Geisler.
Thank you, Convener. Members will recall that the draft plan was presented to this executive in May 2018, and there was a 6-week period of consultation during June and July earlier this year, together with the consultation process as described in paragraph 4 of the report, but it was fairly extensive. We had 10 consultation responses received, and these are described, the identities of the respondents are contained in paragraph 4.5. I'm pleased to say that the responses were broadly supportive of the proposed plan, and mainly the changes suggested were to include additional information or to include additional actions, and a summary of the responses received is in Appendix 1. The plan has been adjusted to take account of certain of the responses, and where we haven't changed the plan, the reasoning for that's provided. And the finalised version of the plan is attached to the report as Appendix 2 for members to consider today. I certainly commend the plan to you. I think it's really concise. I think it's very well laid out. It's a clear format. It describes what we've done, what we're going to do, who needs to help us with that, and what we will do are sort of aspirational elements too, so in each of the categories. So I think it's very well reviewed. The publication and delivery, paragraph 6, the plan will be publicised in early 2019, and there will be a partnership event to coincide with that for the purposes of engaging with our partners who are very critical to the delivery of the plan itself. So, as I say, Convener, I commend the plan to members for the recommendations, paragraph 2, to approve the plan and then to publish and implement. I'm joined by my colleague today, Anna Perton, many of you will know as our biodiversity officer, and this is really her plan, and we're happy to answer any questions that members may have. Thank you.
thanks for that, Mrs Geisler. Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Convener. Hopefully this will go a bit smoother. I'd like to thank the Director, but more than that, I'd like to thank Anna for putting this together. It's a brilliant read. It's good to sit down and look through it, as I'm sure most members here have. As I said at the last meeting, I would meet with Anna, and I did so. And we sat down for a couple of hours, I think. It didn't feel like that, but it was a good wee chat we had. And just one line in this that can read out is: conserve and enhance the wild plants, animals and habitat of the Falkirk Council area. That's basically in a nutshell what this is proposing. If we just touch on a couple of items within it that particular interest to me, and I'm sure others, and one were the geese that visit Slamanan. These geese, it's one of only 2 flocks that come to the full of the United Kingdom, I believe, from the Swedish tundra. One flock goes to Norfolk Broads, is that right? And I think it's only 20, and I think the flock to Slamanan is 200. We have ideas why it goes to Slamanan. I think it's similarities between the landscapes, believe it or not. So that's good reading there. On page 104, the priority bird list was good reading to me as well, with my love of bird life, and I'm sure there's a few twitchers in here that read that with interest. And there's actually only 2 birds in that list that I've never seen, so I think it's the black-tailed godwit, I think it was, and the bean goose. I've not seen the bean goose. Actually up to Slamanan, but I think they'd been and gone. That was the joke spot. The other one I'll touch on was page 85, and it's the invasive non-native species. And we'll all have heard of the Japanese knotweed and the giant hogweed that's caused issues around the area. But one that Anna picked up on that I didn't know and I had to ask her about was the Himalayan balsam. and she explained it very well, and I'm sure everyone will know it's the one that when it sort of has a ready violet leaf flower, and then when you hold the seeds, they pop in your hand, or you ping them and they explode. But that's going to be a big issue because there's just an explosion all around the area. So I do welcome this report, and I've got a couple of questions for Anna directly, if she doesn't mind. There's a lot of actions in this plan. What capacity does the council have to deliver these projects, or how are you going to deliver them all?
There are a lot of actions in the plan. Yes, there are a lot of actions in the plan. Delivery of the plan very much depends on a partnership approach. And one of the key parts of my role is to try and support and develop partnerships with other conservation organisations and other local groups to help us deliver a lot of what is in this plan. That said, there are quite a lot of actions that are for Falkirk Council to deliver or to lead on. And again, as Biodiversity Officer, I will be taking a lead on that. But within the Planning and Environment Unit, we also have two very good countryside rangers who do a lot to help deliver the action plan. As a public body, the Council has a statutory duty to further the conservation of biodiversity and wildlife across all of its functions. So there are actions in the plan where we will be looking to our colleagues throughout the rest of the Council to help us deliver those. So examples are actions relating to the management of our own land, or actions about reducing our consumption of peat, or reducing use of disposable plastics. So there's a real role there for the whole of the Council to be inputting to delivering the plan. Funding, of course, is essential, and we already have a strong track record of pulling in external funding, and we will have to continue to do that with limited internal funds for delivery. We'll be looking to work very hard to work with our partners and pull in external funding to deliver the plan.
Yeah. You sort of touched on my next kind of question here. Is there scope for Falkirk Council's management of its own land to do more to benefit the wildlife?
Yes, absolutely. The management of the land, our own land holding, offers huge opportunities to benefit wildlife. We already do quite a lot. We manage some of the wildlife sites on our land to benefit wildlife. You may have seen some of the meadows that we've created over the last few years. There's a good example at Grange Pans in Bowness, and more recently at Cameron Public Park. And you talked about invasive species, and we're doing a lot to try and control Japanese knotweed on council-owned land. So there's already a lot being done, but there are certainly opportunities. And they're reflected in the action plan. So actions relating to looking at our grass cutting regimes and whether they can be altered to benefit wildlife a bit more, creating more meadows and habitat for pollinators, looking at our woodland estate and how we manage that and potential for expanding that. And also looking at land holdings like road verges, roundabouts, cemeteries. They all potentially offer opportunities to improve them for wildlife, and that's reflected in the plan.
I really like the cemeteries idea. It's something we need to look at now. Just the last one, if I can, convener, because it is an important one this for a lot of people. As well as addressing local needs, are there actions in this plan that help to deliver national targets and the current programme for government in 2018-19?
Yeah, I mean, the plan very much focuses on local needs and what we need to do for our local wildlife, but in doing that it is helping to deliver national and international targets for wildlife conservation and the programme for government. So examples in there are the programme for government talks about creating greenways, where we're creating open space to benefit people and wildlife and to give people access to that sort of natural health service, the well-being they get from being outdoors. And there are projects in this action plan to encourage people out to enjoy our natural environment locally. The programme for government also talks about the John Muir Pollinator Way, which is a programme to create pollinator habitat all the way along the length of the John Muir Way. And in Falkirk, we've already started on a Falkirk Pollinated Way project, which has resulted in some of the meadows that have been created over the last couple of years. And we'll be looking to continue that programme through this action plan. The programme for government also talks about improving compliance with the biodiversity duty, which I mentioned earlier. I'm very pleased to say that Falkirk Council as a public body has been complying with that duty and reporting on it since it came in 2011. But this action plan very much offers the opportunity for us to sort of continue to step up and comply and do more and lead the way in sort of showing what a public body can do in terms of that duty. And last of all, the programme for government talks about delivering the Scottish Biodiversity Strategy, which are our national targets for wildlife conservation, and also the AG targets, which are international targets for wildlife conservation. And the work that this action plan will be doing locally very much feeds into delivering our Scottish biodiversity strategy and also helping Scotland deliver its sort of duties under those international targets as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Sandra.
Happy to second.
Any questions or comments? There's a light on over there.
Myself, the next convener. Like Councillor Gardner, I think this is an excellent plan, and I think that there can't be anybody on the planet, never mind in Falkirk Council, that isn't aware that we need to get more active and support the biodiversity. I think we've had the raising awareness, now we need the activism. I think that, as Anna's touched on, the partnership working that's gone into this is brilliant. It's a pity it can't be rolled out across more of the reports that we see, because the relatively modest sums that the council have put in, you've already said that. After all, this is a statutory duty for the council, and I think that we must give credit to the officers for the work that they did with the partners to bring in the money that was needed to actually do the work that has been done and to continue. You mentioned in 5.1 it's talking about you touched on the John Muir Pollinator Way. I think some of the pollinator parks have been seen as a bit contentious in some areas. There are those that don't maybe appreciate the work that's done by our bees and our butterflies, and I think that there maybe is some more work to be done so that people don't complain about grass verges thinking that the council's just missed them out, but there is actually a positive reason for the wildflowers at the side of the roads, and as you say in the pollinator parks. I think perhaps if we could highlight the fact that our economy is actually underpinned by our environment, and if you take it to the nth degree further down the road, that people would understand and appreciate that the work is being done and that parks aren't just for people. I think that in the past that has been a commonly held view. Touching on a lot of what I was going to say has already been said, but it's not just the bean geese. I think we should celebrate the fact that we've now got pine martins in the area as well. As far as I know, they weren't very keen to come here in the past, so that's good to see. Appendix 1, the only one negative that I saw throughout the report, and I'm not sure whether it's a negative or not, but it was the relatively low response that we got from the public. How many actual responses do you know?
Well, there were the 10 responses that are detailed in there, which primarily came from some of the main organisation stakeholder partners that we work with. The draft plan was promoted on Facebook, so it was certainly seen by large numbers of people on Facebook, over 1,000. We didn't particularly get much in the way of sort of feedback and constructive comment on that, and maybe that's the nature of that particular type of consultation, that you get a thumbs up maybe, but not more detail. So we didn't get a huge amount of detailed feedback from other people.
I just wondered if perhaps the timing of it wasn't great, going out during June and July when a lot of people are on holiday and the schools are off and people's routines are not quite as they normally are. But again, it's not a criticism, it's just a comment. And just on that, the summary of the consultation, obviously there's a lot of good work going on at the back of the comments that were received. The one that I was looking at particularly was that several respondents asked for additional contact details or details of more volunteer opportunities. So I'm going to use this as a sales pitch and say that we are at the moment looking for volunteers to help with the long-term plans at the Lido after the back of the issues with the swans earlier this year. And I'm delighted that I've actually now got a nucleus of local people who are, willing to help to get involved with Friends of the Lido. So if anybody that responded to this looking for volunteers is living in Stennismuir, feel free. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Councillor Coombs, and that emotional point right at the end. Councillor Visit.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I think this is a quality report, and we've all got a duty to protect our environment. And I just noted here that we have a grasshopper warbler in the area, see if I meet it, and I never ever knew that, so I will be actively looking for that. And regards to the great crested newt, I know down at the Pineapple House there's thousands of them there, and there's 5 other ponds I believe where they are, which I don't know where they are. I wonder if you maybe enlighten me. And is there any plans to extend the population of the great crested newt? And also, I'd just like to say that Frog Life will be at Westfield Community Hall on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, and they're giving a discussion on how everybody can get involved, with maybe encouraging frogs and newts and that into their own garden, so again actively involved. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I think there's a question.
In terms of the Great Crested Newts, there are various sites, yes, in Falkirk, and I can give you the details of those. I can give you maps of those if you want. A key site for us is at the old quarry at Avon Glen, just across the motorway from Avondale landfill, where we have 4 ponds, all of which have been enhanced to support Great Crested Newts, which are internationally protected species, and they're also near Avonside Country Park.
And you know about Pineapple House?
Yes, which has been very well looked after by National Trust for Scotland, and they have a healthy population there as well.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? No?
Just to say, Convener, that I'm glad that our previous application to turn Avon Glen into a waste tip itself, it was rejected at the time because it is a very strategic place for us. So that was one decision that was taken that was very welcome.
Just on that, and just important Ms. Alexander makes, I'm sure that memory that was quite costly for ourselves. The waste tip down at Bowness that the newts were first found, and the VP were putting waste there as well. Is that right, Mrs. Gowser?
I think that's possible, yes. The thing about these species they are very resilient, and we do find them in unexpected places as developers find as well.
They're quite happily in waste tips, I understand. Okay, anything else for anybody? No? If not, then we'll move to the Strategic Housing Investment Plans.
Thank you. It's a lengthy report, and I'll try and be as succinct as possible going through it. Within section 1 of the report is outlined the purpose, and that's to approve the Strategic Housing Investment Plan 2019-20 to 2024. Within section 2 of the report outlines the recommendations, and I'll come back to that at the end, please. Section 3 provides a background on the purpose of the SHIP and how it supports our local housing strategy by identifying our investment priorities for affordable housing. The Scottish Government issued new draft guidance in July 18, which highlighted the SHIP is required to produce and submit annually covering the following 5 financial years that are listed within the report. Guidance advises that the SHIP should set out investment priorities for new affordable housing demonstrate how these will be delivered, and then identify all the key resources required to deliver these. In line with the SHIP guidance, potential projects for inclusion in the SHIP must be prioritised using a scoring methodology, and that's set out in Appendix 1. And agreed also by our developing landlords, including Falkirk Council and registered social landlords. In Section 4 of the report, it details the resources available to deliver affordable housing, comprising Scottish Government grant, referred to as a resource planning assumption for RPA, and contributions by the Council. RPAs were allocated to local authorities in 2018 for 3 years. Local authorities were then advised to use 2020 to 21 RPA as the basis for funding the final 3 years of the SHIP that's in front of you. A total of 1,371 additional affordable properties are planned to be delivered from the SHIP, and of that 1,050 circa are Falkirk Council properties, with the rest made up from RSLs. Again, the details of this is in the attachments. Our current LHS, or Local Housing Strategy, has a target of 5 to 10% wheelchair accessible properties in new build. This SHIP has approximately 56 ambient and is also designed with 15% for wheelchair within it as an overall SHIP. The council new build projects within the SHIP provides 69% ambient and 21% wheelchair. So there's a good mix there for future development. In 2016-17, Scottish Government announced a 5-year housing infrastructure fund with up to 50 million available nationally. Falkirk Council submitted a bid for 3 sites relating to the M80, A803 Slip Road at Junction 7 upgrading, and Falkirk Council were successful and were awarded 1.5 million in May 2018 to facilitate junction improvements. The SHIP itself, for members at a point in time, and additional projects proposed, officers will continue to assess and evaluate any further projects, e.g. town centre regenerations or any other projects that may come in within the life of the SHIP. Section 5 outlines our consultation, paying particular attention to housing needs, demand assessment and the thoughts of health and social integration. This is reflected in the housing split. As I said earlier, 90% of all the council's new build are for ambient, disabled or wheelchair. Section 6 of the report outlines the total cost of the council projects, with the SHIP being for the council 127 million, with potential grant of 46 million. The balance will be considered as part of the council's annual rent and housing investment programme budget setting. Also to achieve this, the council project is looking to acquire the land at Denny High School, Bainsford Day Centre, the former Oakbank Home, Main Street, Bonnybridge and Seabeggs Road, which we look to acquire and will generate a capital receipt. At present, also we have temporary resources in place, and we look to extend them to October 21. Due to the ambitious nature of the SHIP, additional 6 temporary resources posts will be required to cover the same period. All associated costs will be met from the housing revenue account. Risk equalities and environmental assessments have been carried out and are detailed within this section. In conclusion, this is our most ambitious SHIP proposed, delivering 1,371 affordable housing units, of which the council, as I said earlier, is proposing to deliver 1,050, which will increase our housing stock in 5 years, all said and done, by circa just over 6%. Officers will continue to review and manage the SHIP to maximise the amount of available funding from Scottish Government in order to deliver the maximum number of locally available affordable properties. Convener, I would like to go back to section 2 where it's outlined the recommendations, and I'm happy for to take any questions.
Thanks for that, Mr. Westmead. Councillor Hughes.
Well, thank you, Convener. Housing isn't, this report is excellent, it's ambitious, and it is a credit to Falkirk Council. Housing isn't just about bricks and mortar or the number of houses which will be built. Housing is a key economic driver, delivering investment both locally and nationally. Although we are increasing housing supply, we will be providing housing and support to vulnerable groups, assisting in creating sustainable communities and maximising job creation and employability. Through the strategic investment plan projects over the next 5 years, a total of 1,371 homes will be delivered. 450 from buybacks, 598 council new build and 323 from registered social landlords. The projected Scottish Government grant will amount to £71,588,650. Just kind of trips off the tongue. You know, it's a massive amount of investment. This is set out in section 2.4, page 130. Also, you will notice in section 4.8, page 121 and page 131 that Falkirk Council was awarded £1.543 million from the Scottish Government's Housing Infrastructure Fund for junction improvements. This will result in 163 homes being delivered by 2021. Also, in relation to the affordable housing policy, there are projections for the delivery of potential numbers in section 5.2, page 133. It should also be noted that since 2013-2014 up to 2017-2018, the number of buyback properties has amounted to 418. On page 130, there is outlined an impressive list of projects over the next 5 years. We must also remember that the SHIP is a corporate activity requiring close working between housing, planning, social work and other departments. The SHIP is also a collaborative approach with many stakeholders, for example, registered social landlords, communities, developers and the Scottish Government. In fact, in recent conversations with Kevin Stewart, Member of the Scottish Parliament and Housing Minister, I have been informed that Falkirk officers are held in high regard. This SHIP is an impressive document highlighting both accelerated house building and the amount of investment being brought to the Falkirk Council area. I commend to the Executive the recommendations in Section 2 as outlined in 2.1. Thank you, Convener.
Thanks for that, Councillor Hughes. Seconded.
I formally second the result.
Thanks, Councillor Bowes. Anyone else? Any comments? Councillor Visit.
Convener, I'd just like to say something on behalf of my colleague Councillor Black. She said it's disappointing to see that there's not more in the plan for Grangemouth. She had previously met with Jennifer Litz before she retired, and she just wondered how they could improve the stock in Grangemouth regarding accommodation and making things more family friendly. There are areas in Grangemouth that could be demolished, and currently as part of the community planning, the Grangemouth Community Conversation has a thematic group related to housing with the housing manager and Paragon etc. on the group. She hopes that this could be put in the plan so that further work could be done to give Grangemouth residents better housing options than they currently have.
Thanks for that. Mr. Gillespie.
One of the things that's together, the SHIP is very much fluid and any further projects may come on board. So for instance, as you said there, Grangemouth and earlier, one of the things we've also got at the present time is looking at the accommodation, i.e. the 3-bedroom flatty accommodation, which is predominantly a lot within the Grangemouth area. And there's 2 or 3 pieces of work that are ongoing, and I'm sure will influence the SHIP on the way forward to once we get the outcome of these. In fact, there is a report later on that may also help further down the line today's executive. Grangemouth itself has had a lot of work done there. There is a lot of new build in past years been done in Grangemouth, but we're very much directed by our housing need and demand assessment. What I would come back and say is that the one thing I think it will influence for your colleague Councillor Black will be the work that we're doing on the regeneration and looking at how we can better use our 3-bedroom properties, and I know that there is some work ongoing at the present time within that area.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just on that, can maybe Mrs. Geiser could give us a wee bit of an overview about the challenges of Grangemouth, particularly around the safety zone and how that impacts, on development within Grangemouth.
Mrs. Geiser.
Yes, Councillor Nicol-John is correct. The consultation zones which zigzag pretty much all of Grangemouth, coming from the various chemical activity within the area, can be quite restrictive in relation to housing opportunities, and that has meant that, and you'll see that coming through our various development plan proposals, that there is a limited capacity for expansion of housing opportunities within the Grangemouth area. So that gives challenges to my colleagues in housing in terms of whole-scale investment, although, as Mr Gillespie said, there has been some new build housing in Grangemouth, so he's managed to fit some in the spaces, and it's and that was obviously delivered in conjunction with colleagues from my service as well. So I think that's a very good piece of work where you can do something in Grangemouth. I think we are.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr Alexander?
Can I ask on behalf of my colleague, Councillor Cawley, if the Allendale programme has been included, or is that still been looked at?
Sorry.
If the Allendale programme has been looked at, or is included?
Yes, they will be included in the SHIP once the Allendale project. Which one there is new? Is that the 10 properties, or do you know which one it is?
I think it's 10.
The 10. I would need to check there. I can come back to you in regards to that. I'm not aware of it, but I will check. This was something that was raised before.
Okay. Anyone else, Councillor Nimmo?
Thanks, Convener. Just a couple of things. Firstly, can I thank Councillor Hughes for recognising the value of what really is Labour's strategic housing investment programme. It was good to have his backing in relation to that. A couple of things. Kenny, you mentioned the issue about disabled access to properties. Now, bearing in mind we've got an ageing population, has all that been taken into account? And do you feel that the percentages that you mentioned are going to work out?
We are driven by our HNDA. We speak very regularly now, and I'm really pleased to say with our colleagues in NHS and with IGIB and looking at the way forward, and that's earlier on I was highlighting that 90% of all new build are ambient, which basically for elderly who have maybe got a small disability but don't need a wheelchair. So within even the council stock, at least 69% will meet that, and that's for our long-term needs, and also the higher number for wheelchairs. So I think we are. I think the benefit of building to these high levels is that should free up other stock hopefully as well, that might be freed up for more families as well. The other thing within our new build is that there is more family homes that will accommodate any future potential disabled or wheelchair access issues as well. Again, one of the things that we've found with our stock at present, because of the time it was built, it never ever took on board what the potential long-term future of family life would be.
Okay. The other thing, Ken, just in relation to Oak Bank, the care home that was demolished in Pullman, obviously that's in my ward, and it's still in social works books, but has there been a value put to the land?
The outlay, as outlaid in the report there, the value will be determined by the district valuer, and if HRA will look to support that and provide a capital return to the council.
It's still not been done, it's in the process.
It's still not been finalised.
Okay, right. Thanks, Convener.
Can I thank Kenny for this report? Quite simply, as you said yourself, and I think anybody reading it will see that it's obviously a very ambitious plan, and I know the work you've done and since you've come into your post, that doesn't scare you. I think the ambient wheelchair section of it, which answers Councillor Nimmo's question, is particularly welcome on my behalf. I like the continued support where we're doing buybacks for houses for people. It's particularly strong in my own ward of Castlereagh and Triest, where I think there was 50 brought back in the last year. And sometimes people just need that support and help from the council, so that's got to be welcomed. The one thing that's not been mentioned so far is the quality of housing that you're building. I've been to a number of the projects that Falkirk Council has built, and to be honest, they're absolutely fantastic in their quality, which gives people a better quality of life. And I'll just repeat that. Thank you for this great report.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else? I think I'd like to say it is a wonderful report. We can't deny the fact, and in fact should be grateful for the fact that money's coming in for the Scottish Government. That's what the Scottish Government is really supposed to do. That's why it's there, and to their credit they're doing it in this particular report. I remember in the late 80s, early 90s, we used to ask people what colour bathroom suites they wanted before the house was built, and that type of thing. But this really does follow on with the quality of housing. And Councillor Reid over there has persistently been in here about ambulatory people and people needing wheelchair access. So it's a good report all round, and it's only be beneficial for the community at large. Having said that, we'll now move on to plan. Mrs. Geiser.
Yes, thank you, Convener. This is next item is linked to the one that members have previously considered. As members will know, the Planning Scotland Act 2006 gave a new status to supplementary planning guidance, and that was associated with the changes to the local development planning process, making plans themselves much briefer and concise, supplemented by the supplementary guidance that I've referred to. The Council at that time identified in relation to LDP 1 17 supplementary guidance notes, all of which bar one have now been completed, and SG 12 on affordable housing was approved by the Executive in 2014 and then formed part of the LDP when it was approved in July 2015. So as you can see, it's been a wee while since the supplementary guidance was prepared, and things move on. The importance of the guidance is that it is relevant and timely for developers to be able to make use of this and help them guide them in relation to their applications. So what we have presented to members today is a revised version of SG 12 with some minor updates which are required either because of passage of time or changes in other circumstances, or alternatively just some references which are a bit of tidying up, and the draft is with the report. The process now is that once approved, the draft will be subject to a consultation period which will run for 8 weeks per the report, and what we're suggesting is that in the event that there are no responses to the consultation process or minor comments come back, then I'd be authorised just to submit this to Scottish Ministers for approval. If there are obviously more substantial comments come back, the matter is to be referred back to members, and the same as the biodiversity plan has been this morning. So those are the recommendations contained in paragraph 2 of the report. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mrs. Councillor. Councillor Gardner.
Councillor Gardner, sir.
Is it not? Environment portfolio would be
Economic development.
Well, I thought it was Councillor Alexander.
Okay, thank you.
Apologies.
Accepted. Happy to move the recommendations contained in paragraph 2 of the report. Mrs. Geisler has explained adequately the purpose of the report. It doesn't hold back the consultation for the local development plan 2, nor does it interfere with the process. It merely tidies up a number of areas that to the Council's benefit, I would suggest, and also to the benefit of those who require the clarification of the local plan as soon as possible. So with that, I'd formally move the recommendations.
Okay, second.
Happy to second, Convener.
Okay, anyone, any comments on that? If not, then we'll move to item 9.
Thank you, Convener. Convener, as Committee will be aware, this is the 4th update on Council of the Future for Committee, and you will see the progress that's been made since we last reported. For the period July through to September, the Board has met twice, and there are a number of different projects that the Board has now considered. Those are set out in paragraph 4.2 of the report, and we have provided some overheads with some information on those projects, as well as the update on the wider project list, which are both at appendices 1 and 2 of your report. Sections 4.4 through to 4.8 of the report provide you with a number of key projects areas which are developing as part of the overall programme and which may be of interest to the committee. I won't go through these in detail, but just maybe if I pull out some of the key points. On our Smart Work, Smart Travel project, you'll be aware that's where we're trying to encourage employees to move away from travelling to meetings and wherever possible to do that by other means, phone calls, conference calls, wherever that's available, video conferencing. Where they do have to travel, we're trying to encourage them to use the pool cars, and we now have 60 pool cars in place, and we're encouraging employees to use those. Our Next Generation Contact Centre is listed there as well. We opened that on the 4th of July. And since doing that, we have had 50 of our helplines move into one helpline, and you'll see some of the information about that in the report, as well as some of the feedback that we've received. On our BMD project, we have now moved from 3 depots down to 2, and we have 25 employees working in a home-to-work basis where they take their vehicles home at night and travel direct to jobs. That's helping us with an increase in productivity, which is estimated to be around 30%, and it's also meaning a reduction in the time taken to complete some of the actual jobs. We've also put in place work scheduling for the East area, where appointments are being made available to the council, and it's a hope that that can be rolled out to the whole of the council area by the end of this year. We have around 50 employees who have handheld devices, and they are now receiving their work lines to do their work direct to those devices, rather than having to wait or go back to the depot to actually get the work lines. So that again is helping with some of the work that's being done. On the Hub project, members here will have received reports on that previously, and you'll see that the West Advice Hub in Cairnbank is due to be completed around November this year, and that's another step in the right direction for that project. The Living Well Falkirk project is one that's being developed by our Health and Social Care Partnership, and that is about putting an application. It's now available on the Falkirk Council website if anyone wants to have a look. And that allows anyone to go onto that and put in their own personal information and try and assess the support needs or any other support that they may require or which may be of benefit to them. In addition to the various projects that are underway, and since last reporting, we've also completed the review of the governance arrangements that we previously reported to this committee, and that includes the board itself, the council and workforce of the future group, which are our directors, and the various service change boards that happen at a service-based level and oversee the overarching governance of the project. We also have Council of the Future change groups, and that's where our employees and our trade unions can get directly involved in some of the projects as and when it's relevant to them. As we develop the programme and through all of those groups, there is also a recognition of the need to increase the pace of the change that we're actually achieving, with also a greater focus on how we link that directly to our medium-term financial plan. In terms of engagement, you'll see at 4.11 we have had a leadership forum, 4 hackathons and a series of listening events with our employees. We have also undertaken a series of work to learn from others, to look at benchmarking, to look at lessons learned in other councils, both north and south of the border, who have worked on transformation, and we're following up on a number of those examples. We have been working as well with our project managers and delivering some development sessions to ensure good project management arrangements are in place. Those are being run on a weekly basis and will continue through to the end of the year. Committee will also remember that Council agreed a change fund of £700,000, and we've had bids from the Closer to Home, the bereavement services and our social work information system projects for funding to help improve the pace of the change through those actual projects. There's nothing else I would want to particularly highlight from the report. The recommendations can be there as set out in section 2, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Council of the Future is a key delivery vehicle for us. It's only by transformation we will be able to continue to deliver a broad range of services to our citizens, and not just those that are statutory, but those that are desirable ones, because they bring added value to the council area. Particularly as we go into the budget round, the financial pressures, and looking at the longer term and at our 5-year delivery, our 5-year planning for our budget. These are all projects that are driven from the bottom up by staff who are at the front line and are closest to our service users and know what will make the difference. And as a result, I think that is what will make them most achievable in getting outcomes that we are looking for. The outcomes obviously are going to be linked to our key priorities, and particularly by moving the balance of the frontline face-to-face services to those that are most vulnerable and those that need the most support, enabling those who are more able to access services in a different way. However, we need to maintain the pace of that change in order to be able to reap the benefits in the bigger picture. And recently at the Audit Committee that was expressed quite clearly by our auditors, and that was an area that we need to continue to work on and make sure that it does start to deliver, because it will be a chunk of what we need to do in order to meet our budget gap. Not wholly, but it will have a significant impact. Therefore, this is quite an important programme that we continue to take forward, and in that we have to also remember that we are seeing improved services as well, and the response from our service users has been very positive, and some of the outcomes we've seen already, and obviously there's far more to come, as Karen's highlighted that various programmes, particularly closer to home within our social work services for children. So I'm happy to move the report. Camilla.
Formally second reserve the right.
Any questions or comments?
Just a question, Convener. Karen, you mentioned in the report that we've now got 60 cars that are in use. Is it envisaged that this number is going to increase? And the other part of the question is, are we still buying petrol cars, or is it electric or hybrid?
The actual number of the cars, we're monitoring the usage of them to make sure that we're seeing a reduction in the mileage that's then claimed, because we need to make sure these are getting used properly. We're also then looking at, are they in the right places? So there's a piece of work that's underway to look at, for the cars and where they're placed, are they actually at the right buildings where people will use them most? So there's some work getting done there, but ultimately if it proves to be a success and it shows that the mileage is coming down, there may well be a further bid to members to ask for additional cars, but we would be looking to bring some evidence that it's actually returning on the investment that's been made so far. In terms of the petrol and hybrid cars, I don't know if Rona maybe wants to pick that one up.
We are still buying petrol vehicles at the moment. We'll get a good rate in terms of the cost of these, but we also have bid into, obviously electric vehicles are far more expensive, but we have bid into government funding for electric vehicles and also charging stations, which was successful, and we will be putting in another bid for more electric vehicles. That's done on a community planning partnership basis, so that's shared amongst our community planning partners. So rolling out the greener vehicles is certainly on our agenda, but we have to bid in for funding for that, but we're continuing to do that.
Anyone else? If not, could I just ask a question, Mrs. Geisler? Do we know where we're buying these cars? Are they bought locally? Are they bought in Falkirk? Where are they bought?
They'll be procured through the Scotland Excel contract, I should imagine, but I can get details of that. Yeah. There were details, I think, of the different makes of cars and the procurement arrangements were reported in the information bulletin. I can certainly go and find those for you.
That's fine. The only thing that puzzles me is we keep being told we're running out of electricity and we're going to conserve electricity, not the council but the nation as a whole, and then we're going to have electricity points where we can charge electric vehicles all over the country. That's the plan, so we'll see how that works. But anyway, thanks for that. Thanks for that. Councillor Gardner, I asked if anybody wanted to speak. You didn't take the opportunity. I'm asking questions. We'll just move on to it. Okay, thanks for that. There's Mr. Alexander again. Thanks for that, Mr. Alexander. We'll now move on, Mr. Alexander, to...
I'd like a question of standing orders.
On you go, Mr. Alexander.
Can I ask the acting legal officer with regards to comments from the chair that his position is to facilitate anything, facilitate debate. It doesn't close debate and as per standing orders, where by indicating that he has a question.
The principles applied by the convener of a meeting are set out in the standing orders. They do involve facilitating debate and discussion. They also involve making sure that the debate is conducted in an economic and business-like manner as well. As I understood the situation there, the convener had asked if people had wanted to speak and had taken the opportunity himself to be the final person to speak.
Well, that gives the convener, I think, that gives the convener. Mr. Goldie, I've got a further question for Mr. Goldie.
Mr. Alexander,
You just heard your role is to facilitate.
Moving on, update on the HQ replacement leader of the council.
Members will recall that this matter was asked
Mr. Alexander,
by
please let the officer speak. Mrs. Gurley, could you start again? We could hear him for an interruption.
And thank you, Convener. Yes, members will recall that this was last considered by the Executive in August of this year, and at that point, obviously there were visitors to the meeting that day who were keen that this matter be moved along expeditiously, and at that meeting I gave an undertaking to report back to this meeting with progress to date. And that's the intention of the report today, together with some decisions I'd like members to make. The principles associated with the replacement of the HQ are described in the background section to the report of paragraph 3, and progress is described further on in the report. The relocation of the HQ in the Arts Centre is very closely associated with the transformation and regeneration of Falkirk Town Centre, as was discussed at the last meeting. And there is a town centre working group that members will be familiar with, and there is a significant member presence on that group, membership of that group. And earlier this month, on the 3rd of October, there was a workshop held in Falkirk Town Centre where there were representations from the council and a number of other stakeholders in the transformation project, where the discussion was around the aspirations for the town centre, what the town centre is going to look like in the 21st century, and a vision and narrative that flowed from that. The working group itself, that was a workshop and had a much wider representation. The working group itself is intended to meet again in November, and they will distill the learning from that workshop facilitated by SFT and Architect Design Scotland, for the purposes of further developing their thinking around town centre regeneration. So I think it was very useful and helpful in shaping the context in which the HQ and Art Centre project will move forward. So in terms of the business case for the HQ and Arts Centre, which I was asked to look at following the last meeting, given the council has very limited, almost zero land ownership interest in the town centre, to take forward, other than our own site of course, we anticipate that the project would be taken forward in conjunction with the development partner, coming forward with an appropriate site. This would be part of the procurement process. We were obviously required to update the business case in relation to both the HQ and the Art Centre. There were business cases that were prepared previously, as you'll recall, but these were for specific sites under specific circumstances, and time has moved on since the HQ project was put on hold in 2016. Members previously considered the capacity in relation to the HQ, and obviously they have taken a view that it would be in excess of 300 workstations for purposes of adding in the regeneration value to the development. But we would suggest that you also seek variant bids for 500 and 700 workstations in order that you can take a view as to whether or not you want to have a larger facility. As part of the business case, we'll also have to clearly consider issues around cost and running costs, and how they will fit into the work that's being undertaken on the medium-term financial plan, which members are already familiar with as well.
The Arts Centre specifically will require to have a separate business case. It's a completely different type of facility. But the thinking again there is to roll forward the previous capacity of 500 seats with ancillary accommodation that was the outline specification used for the previous proposal. There are a number of pieces of work that will need to be done in relation to the Arts Centre around particularly the engagement with communities that hopefully will be using the facility for their own purposes as well as the Trust being involved in that. There will be a business case that will require to reflect all of these, and that will impact on the finalised brief. But also I think it's really important that there's an element of contributions sought from both national and local organisations for a view to delivering the facility itself, and also there will be ongoing revenue costs associated with that. In order to do this work, it's suggested that a fund of £200,000 to meet those costs will be required, and we expect that work to take around a period of 6 months, reporting back to members in the spring of next year. I've already mentioned that there is a critical need to associate all the work we're doing in relation to the HQ and Arts Centre with the medium-term financial plan, and also to reflect, as I've mentioned, that time has moved on since members last considered the project. At that time, you'll recall that in respect of workstations, a ratio of 0.8 was to be the multiplier, and that means that that's 0.8 desks per FTE, which translates to 4 desks for every 5 people. Given that time has moved on, as I've mentioned, and our knowledge in relation to other similar projects has grown, we're suggesting that maybe a multiplier of 0.6 would be more appropriate moving forward, and that would be our suggestions to contain that in the specification. There is a more detailed specification in Appendix 1 to the report. Other work that's ongoing at the moment, and I'd like to thank the Leader of the Council for her contribution to this, is in relation to partner organisations. We're having far more fruitful discussions now with public sector partners in relation to potential sharing of facilities. That not only spreads the cost of the facility in relation to the Council, but also offers opportunities for co-location that those opportunities would bring to our citizens and customers of various services. There will require to be a procurement exercise undertaken. This is a very big project. It's a project that's covered by the EU competition arrangements, and there's a flowchart contained in Appendix 2 in relation to the steps that we would require to take. There are a number of criteria to select any bidders. There will be mandatory criteria which are really intended to determine whether or not bids are compliant before we can move on with them. And then there are a number of assessable criteria, again, that are contained in an appendix to the report, and you'll see how the process that we would go through to get ourselves to a shortlist of 3 to 4 through the competitive dialogue process, which is one of the processes that's permitted in terms of the appropriate procurement. Timescales are described in paragraph 418 of the report. We would have, as part of our initial contract notice, a bidders' day where we would invite bidders in to come and look at various pieces of work that we've done, and also to look around the town centre itself and to have information around the opportunities that are in the town centre, and also information about the project from officers and partners. The Council obviously has compulsory purchase powers. Whether or not it would require to use these as delivering this in delivering the project is not known at this stage, and nor am I asking members to take a view as to whether or not they would exercise these. If that came to pass, I would obviously bring something back with specific proposals. But what we are looking at today is asking members to confirm that it is available for us to conclude in the particulars that the fact that would not be ruled out if that was relevant. Finally, in relation to the decision that members previously took, there was a specific reference to having regard to the town centre pedestrianisation arrangements that are in place and whether or not these require to be reviewed. I referred earlier to the vision and action plan that the town centre working group would be looking at, and we would be seeking to incorporate the review and thinking into that piece of work there. The implications convener are contained in paragraph 6. and the recommendations in paragraph 2, and these are to agree the outline specification contained in the report, specifically the space standard moving from 0.8 to 0.8 to 0.6, and agree to initiate the procurement process together with the funding requirements that brings, and obviously there will be further reports back to members in due course. Thank you, Convener.
Thanks for that. First thing,
Thank you, Convener. Good to see the report come forward, a very positive report as well. The last last executive meeting, we had a very strong representation from the retail market and a very strong case put forward. Council was asked, to take action, and we're now responding to that call for action. The workshop that was held on the 3rd of October excuse me, was very, very good, very productive. We had representation there from Scottish Future Trust and Architecture and Design Scotland and Town Centres First, who are all supporting the council as an exemplar in going forward around town centre regeneration, and that can bring an awful lot of benefits with it. But what was very important and was very, very positive was the engagement with the stakeholders who came along to that particular event. Broad range of partners, and some tremendous work that's been done in drawing out what we want to see for the future of our town centre, and that is not exclusive to the council. It's something that we want everybody to buy into. And from that, as Mrs. Geisler said, there's a lot of development potentially coming out of that, including investors seeing some opportunities within the town centre. However, it still remains that the Falkirk Council as the key catalyst, and our continued commitment to this will be key, and will hopefully bring the potential of some stability to our town centre. I think this report is designed to take that forward to that next stage, and allow that piece of work to be done. We clearly see there's economic benefits of locating the office accommodation and the arts centre within the town centre, and that was well debated at the last meeting. Also, it is contained within our investment zone proposals, with the outline business case having now been submitted to government in support of the Scottish Futures Trust. We have some timescales there. They are very, very challenging, but it also demonstrates our commitment, and has the potential to do the job of bringing the stability. They will be challenging, but I think if we work collectively with our partners across the piece, then we can start to see some progress and actually see something actually being delivered, in a picture of our town centre starting to build into a wider master plan. I appreciate there may be anxieties around moving from a 0.8 to a 0.6 desks per full-time equivalent, but that is based on what other town centres have been, other council buildings, new builds have done, and it has worked to be very effective. That obviously will need to wait and see the outcome of the specification. There's been very positive engagement with our colleagues in health to look at potential sharing of offices for backroom services, and that is something that I think we should build on and continue to seek if there are any other partners that we wish to co-locate, which would make the building far more achievable financially. I'm happy to propose the recommendations at 2.1 that allows this project to move to the next stage. Obviously, members will be kept in the loop and continually updated as we move forward, and will allow some of the work of the Town Centre Working Group and creating the master planning to go forward. Thank you.
Second.
Second to reserve the right.
Thanks. Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks very much, Convener. I just refer you to page 174. It's the selection and assessment criteria for bidders under site location. It says that the location is to be within the town centre area. There's no plan attached as it says in the paper, but I believe from speaking to officers that when the tenders go out, there'll be a circle drawn around what is the town centre, and that the developers will be asked to identify any possible sites that might be available. Can I just have it confirmed here and now that this site that we're currently in is going to be within the town centre, and that this will be one of the sites that the developers will be asked to look at?
I'm just looking for the reference in the report, Councillor Nimmo, but there is a reference in the report something that makes clear that the limits are those that are in the draft LDP2. So that would exclude the retail park, but it would include this site, the site, the municipal building site. This municipal building site is in LDP1 and it remains in the draft of LDP2.
Right, okay, I've heard that confirmed. Can I just ask why the retail park has been taken out of the LDP2 then?
Well, that's because it's been redesignated as a commercial centre rather than necessarily the town centre. It's for the purposes of really reflecting the character of the retail park as opposed to the town centre, and that was approved by members in the draft LDP, which is now out to consultation. So obviously that's a matter when the consultation responses come back. Members can debate whether or not that is the final shape of the local development plan moving forward.
Anyone else? We have got a situation here where we've got 8 members who are members associated with the town centre and who work collectively with the town centre working group. But given that we are the major financial player here, I think it would be acceptable for these 8 members to meet prior to going up the road to meet the other people in the group so that they're better informed. So can that be agreed that these 8 members would meet and be given all the up-to-date information prior to going up to the town to meet their colleagues for the business side of things? Can we agree that?
Happy to support that.
Councillor Alexander.
Yes, Convener, we did actually have the 3 local members. You took one off.
Yeah. Pardon?
You took one off.
Aye, that's the history. I'm talking about the 8 people that are there that are elected by the executive.
It's actually only 3.
Pardon?
That's only 3.
It's only 3? Only 3 what?
3 people who are elected to represent the town centre.
We'll have that debate. We've got 8 members elected to the group at the last executive. Mr. Moody.
Convener, you're referring to the decision at the August executive meeting, which was to expand the membership of the council representation on the town centre working group, and that was then politically balanced, if you recall, at that meeting. So the membership that's being referred to is the council representation on the town centre working group, and I think Convener Bottom, picking up from your comment, is a suggestion that that set of appointed council representatives meets separately prior to each meeting of the town centre working group to be briefed by Mrs. Geisler or her officers.
Yep.
Convener, I'd like the director or the chief legal officer to go back and actually check the numbers. My recollection was it was 3, 2 and 1.
Well, just for a second. We've already approved that, man.
Yeah,
we've
approved the minute.
You want a recess?
I'm asking for clarification of what was in that report.
Well, you can get clarification. Quite sure you can.
Yeah, the decision was that there would be representation 3221, which is 8.
3221. Okay, fair enough, I accept that.
Quite happy with the suggestion.
I'm quite happy with the suggestion, yes.
Just for my clarification, I can't remember who the members are. Is Councillor Reid still excluded from that?
You can't remember? No. I can have it. Get the information to you. Anybody else? Any comments to make? No? If not, okay, thanks for that. So we'll now go to item 11, corporate investments and update. Mrs. Guy. Mrs. Guy again. Sorry.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, this report updates members on the work of the Investment Zone Initiative and obviously the Town Centre transformation and our HQ Art Centre projects will form part, as the leaders mentioned, of this particular initiative, but it's a far wider transformational agenda than that. The investment zone, just to remind members, is Falkirk's equivalent of a City Deal growth accelerator initiative, and it's part of the overall plan by the Scottish Government to cover all areas of Scotland with a similar arrangement moving forward. Paragraph 3 notes the context that's the basis for our investment zone and how that links in with the aspirations of both Scottish and UK governments in terms of developing the economy of the area. As has been mentioned already this morning, the outline business case for the investment zone was submitted to both governments earlier this year, May this year, and a summary of the submission that was made as an Appendix 1 to the report. And the bid is for £2.7 million worth of funding to deliver the package of works that's described. But it's intended to build on the strengths of our area and also to complement the TIF initiative, and there's a report on the TIF initiative later on in the agenda. Following the submission and a lot of work involving Scottish Futures Trust and Scottish Government and UK Government officials and your own officers, there was a workshop held in Victoria Quay in August of this year involving a number of stakeholders, which was very helpful, got very useful and helpful suggestions from Scottish Government officials who were there together with UK governments in guiding us forward. What we have done thus far is it relates to the outline business case submission, which was the steering group for that was the Falkirk Economic Partnership, which members will be familiar with. And helpfully, following the submission of the outline business case and the workshop that I referred to, we have confirmation that our proposals are on the right track. There are a number of issues that have been raised, and these are contained in paragraph 4.3 of the report. Critical ones, I would say, are around the need for us to identify contributions from not only from the Council but from other partners, which is going to be very key in terms of the offering that comes from government. Both governments will want to see that the money they're putting in is matched in some way by other contributions that are going to come forward from partners, and very helpful. We have a number of partners already in place through the Economic Partnership, including a number of key industry partners. There is a requirement for us to provide more detail in relation to each of the projects. Now this way forward differs slightly from what had previously been envisaged in terms of a final business case. And it is in essence, we will now be required to deliver a final business case in respect of each of the 9 project areas. And the last element that came through very strongly from the workshop was the need to demonstrate elements of inclusive growth in each of the projects and overall. Now, we feel that we're very strongly placed in that regard because each of our projects has a very strong inclusive growth element to it, and there is also a separate project, an overarching project, to address issues of engagement and employability. We need to finalise the submission, as I've mentioned. We need to do that by completing a number of templates, project-specific templates, which are in effect many business cases. And there's going to be additional funding required to complete that work we anticipate around £150,000. We're seeking contributions from our partner organisations. I'm pleased to say some of these have already come back and confirmed formally that their commitment to making that contribution, but there will require to be an additional contribution to the Council of £50,000, which can come from our existing resources. Thereafter, the work will be completed, and it's hoped that that will be completed towards the end of this year, with us heading towards a heads of terms situation early in 2019. That's a challenging timescale. We've mentioned that in relation to other projects today, but I think that the work that's already been done in relation to these projects, particularly with the partners I've mentioned, will stand us in good stead. Consultation, as you would expect, has been fairly extensive amongst partners, and they're listed in paragraph 5 of the report. There will be a key element of consultation, wider consultation with communities, obviously to build on the inclusive agenda that I've mentioned already. The implications are contained later on in the report, convener. You can see that the £207 million bid that we made is very ambitious, but members will have heard me here before saying that this is because there's a big significant part of this project that relates to Grangemouth, and Grangemouth obviously is of key national importance both at a Scottish and a UK level. The recommendations are contained in paragraph 2 of the report, and these are to commit additional funding of 50k that I mentioned, and also to extend the appointment of our consultants Grant Thornton to help us complete this work. That's the most cost-effective way for us to be able to meet the work that requires to be done, and also in the time scale, and that is compliant with the procurement regulations. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mrs. Geiser. Councillor Meeple.
Thank you, Convener. This is a vision to create a sustainable long-term investment area that's greener, smarter, resilient and more inclusive, and to take us over the next 30 years at least. We've already got a commitment from certainly the Scottish Government with regard to filling in the gaps where people haven't fallen within the City Alliances. Falkirk being particularly different, but also very, very significant, as Mrs. Geiser said, for both the Scottish and UK economy. By seeking this investment, particularly around new technologies and renewable energies, will create an amazing impact on the economy, particularly of Grangemouth, and the prospect of creating 5,400 jobs for the area, and that's not taking into account the supply chain that then comes from that. The outline business case has been viewed positively, and the feedback is now to look at working up the particular projects into the various templates, and it's been valuable that the links that we've had with government in doing that at both UK and Scottish level. I think the investment that's been asked for of £50,000, if we get 207 million from that, is well worth that by way of a return. So I think that's very good use of our existing resources. We do continue to need some support from out of the council, as resources are tight within our development service, particularly with the economic development, because of the range of work that's going on just now. And there's not an indirect link with our town centre, as part of our investment zone bid is to look to help shore up our plans for Falkirk Town Centre and developing that larger and broader master plan for that economic stability. I'm therefore pleased that we're able to move to the next stage on this, and again there's challenging timescales, but I think there's a bigger prize to be got, and therefore we need to be quite focused on the work that needs to be done in taking this forward. So I'm happy to move the recommendations. That's in section 2.
Thanks for that, Sigla.
Happy to second and reserve the right.
Okay. Any comments on that? No? If not, it's an excellent report, and it just proves the work that's been done to get the tip up and running was well worthwhile financially to the council as well, and benefit the community. No other comments. We'll now move on to Mr. Snail.
Thank you, Convener. We report the position on with capital and revenue to the executive at alternative meetings. So this meeting is the turn of the revenue position. As always, it's split into the two main blocks: general fund and HRA, and also attention given to the reserves position. So starting with the general fund in section 4 on the first page, the positions summarised at para 413, where we're projecting by the year end expenditure to be above available resources by just short of 2 million. That's obviously still of concern, albeit is an improvement from the position last reported in August. In para 414, where we set out the position for all the services, that start with our biggest service, children's services, you can see the actions taken by the service to look to bring their budget back into line, which is what the approved recommendation at the last meeting from executive was for them to do. The core part of the overspend is attributable to the position under the social work part of the service, and there's an important remedial strategy in play now, sitting within the Council of the Future agenda entitled Closer to Home Strategy. So that is positioned and indeed will need to deliver transformational change that will bring that budget back into line, but that will take time to deliver, hence the compensating adjustments taking place in the interim in the education side of the overall service. You'll also see under development services the reflection of the decision taken at the September meeting in terms of waste management, and given the lead-in time, the benefits of that won't materialise to 1920, but again there are compensating elements within the service's overall budget that keeps their overall position in balance. I won't dwell on the other service areas which are set out in that section. In section 4.3 we have a standard part that just gives some references and metrics relating to workforce changes. You can see data on the level of severance over the years, redeployment, and also our staffing numbers. Turning to the other significant block in 4.4, that's the housing revenue account. I think the key point there is in the very first line at 4.4.1, where at this point in the year we're projecting that part of the business to be in line with the budget. The third block relates to reserves, and that's set out in section 4.5. The main fund, general fund reserve, the projected position is noted at 4.5.2, where we're projecting our balance at the year end just short of 10 million. That is an improvement from the position reported in August, and of course that's attributable to the improvement in the projected overspend. The overspend flushes straight through to our bottom line, and that's where the reserve sits. The Repairs and Renewals Fund is summarised at 4.5.4. You'll be familiar with the fact that there are various service components sitting within that fund, and you can see the summarised positions set out for each of those segments in 4.5.4. The projected position is set out in the appendix, and you can see that with work in progress, the balance on the Repairs and Renewals Fund will be very much diminished by the end of the financial year. The other category of reserves, earmarked reserves, and as the name suggests, those are reserves set up for particular purposes. They are summarised at section 4.5.5. There's 5 or so of those. Maybe just to mention, under the Devolved Schools Management, which is the first one listed under that section, that is part of their mitigation to help deal with the overspend in children's services, which we touched on at the front end of the report. A significant sum, just short of 800,000, is being transferred to the general fund to help cover that position. That, of course, isn't sustainable, so more sustainable action will need to be taken going forward to manage that overspend. I won't dwell on the other reserves set out in that section. I think the position is pretty straightforward and hasn't moved from what was previously reported. So if I can just jump back to the recommendations, they're inviting you to note the financial position as projected, the projected position of reserves, and the instruction to service directors to make sure that they take the necessary action to ensure their budgets or their spend remains within the resources available in their budgets. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mr. Smiro. Mr. Nito, John.
Thank you, Convener. I think there has to be some credit given to the service in looking at very closely mitigation for the projected overspend within children's services, and while some of the mitigation is really very much short term, it gives the opportunity for the investment under the Council of Future to look at developing a closer to home, which can have some really real significant savings as it moves forward, and will indeed hopefully help to provide a better outcome for the children, as well as some efficiencies in actually being able to deliver the support that's needed closer to home and not out of the council area. However, that's notwithstanding that we do have a budget gap of around 14 million this year. This report, however, does put us in a reasonable position in going forward to be able to meet the budget predictions given for the last year, and gives us a basis to start to work towards. And I would hope that by the time that we get closer to the outcome, that some of the mitigations will have an impact, and we will go closer to our budget predictions rather than an overspend position. That said, obviously children's services, and particularly children's social work, is very variable, and it doesn't take too many children with very complex needs to come into the system to have an impact. However, that has to be looked at and managed as best we can. I think on the whole, we're in a better position than we were 2 months ago. And hopefully that will continue to improve as we move forward, and I think that it gives us a good basis to start our budget planning on, and very shortly we'll have the officers' suggestions for our budget proposals coming forward for members' consideration, and obviously the Council of Future programme and the medium-term financial planning. With the longer term 5-year plan will also help with the whole programme as we move forward.
Can I formally second the reserve as right from back in?
Anyone, any comments to make?
Thanks, Convener. Just again in relation to the children's services overspend, I'm just wondering if this council has done any benchmarking work in respect of other local authorities. I mean, I take what the report says. There has been changes in the Children and Young People Act, which has caused more work and cost, I dare say. But has anything been done in conjunction with any other local authorities to find out where they're placed, whether they're doing things better or differently from us to manage the situation?
There's nobody here from Children's Services to directly answer your question. So as proxy, if I can advise that I know the service as an integral part of this major review are very much having an eye to best practice elsewhere. I know North Lanark have a particular pedigree on that front, as do Fife. So the service is alert to lessons to be learned from other authorities that have demonstrated effectively transformational change, which is what we need to do to manage this very difficult and challenging area. The demographics tell us that this is going to be a recurrent problem, so we need to try and get more on the front foot and be proactive to help us manage this position medium and long term.
Do we know if there's been any further increase since the last report?
The position shown in the statement shows that element, the social work element of the service, pretty much static, very marginal movement from what we reported in August. So I think that's taking us into the timeline for those changes to be enacted, with the benefits of that expected to start probably right towards the tail end of the financial year and into the subsequent year, hence the importance of compensating adjustments being made on the larger education side of children's services in the interim as a holding position. But what we do need to get to, in addition to a balanced position, however it's achieved in the current financial year, is a more sustainable position going forward. And I would emphasise, and the service recognise it, that the closer to home review does need to move with pace and tackle the very real issues that it's been set up to do.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
Anyone else? Councillor Bowles.
Thank you, Convener. On the topic of the residential care side, I think it's particularly where the overspend has been. There has been a number of meetings carried out, myself and Councillor Colley, on this, and it was essential that it was done. Hopefully there's no question on that. I would like to thank the services, as the leader of the council has said. They have reacted really well. I know there's been other work through CMT as well with the service to actually bring this overspend down by just over £1 million, and they're also looking at where they can work to bring it down even further. There's been 4 meetings so far, and there's possibly some going forward as well, to work with them to constructively help that service. But I think overall, I think moving on this report, that we're actually the reserves have actually moved back up again. It's quite a significant figure that's been able to happen, and that's a thank you to every service in this council, and particularly the work Mr. Smale does.
Thanks for that, Councillor Bowles. Anyone else? If not, then we'll move to item 13, Mrs. Geiger.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, this report is for 4 members this morning because we're intending to, or we're hoping to, lease the refurbished Arnotdale House to the Cyrenians at a reduced rent, which is available to the council in terms of the 2010 regulations that I'll come on to speak about. Arnotdale House, many of you will be familiar with the property, is a property that's held in Falkirk Common Good Fund. It's a Grade B listed building, and like a number of buildings, similar buildings, it's fallen into some degree of disrepair, having been vacant for some time. The external fabric of the building, as we note, paragraph 3.1, was refurbished in 2014, and then there was a very welcome grant from the Regeneration Capital Grant Fund, which allowed phase 2 of the works to be completed subsequent to that. The Cyrenians, again, members will be familiar with the charity. They're well established, highly regarded operation, and they work closely with the council in a number of respects. They have been heavily involved already in the regeneration of Dollar Park with the restoration of the walled garden. The proposal that the Cyrenians have placed before the council is to transform the building back into a centrepiece, as it's described in the report, within the community, and to have a number of facilities for public access, particularly in the cafe area, which I think would be very welcome in that area, but would also be used for office space and the employability work that they do in relation to their client groups. The fit out of the cafe has already been undertaken by the council at the cost of £52,600, and that cost has been rentalised throughout the term of the lease, as is described later on in the report in paragraph 4.5. There are key outputs from the refurbishment project which tie in with the requirements of the 2010 regulations. These regulations allow authorities to indeed to dispose, or in this case lease, properties to other organisations for less than market value, provided a set of criteria can be met, and these are described in paragraph 5.2 of the report. The market rent for the facility will be £40,000, and it is the intention to lease to the Cyrenians for £10,000 a year on terms described in paragraph 4.5, as I've said. There are a key list of outputs from the project itself in paragraph 4.4, and the objectives of the project have been assessed against those criteria described in paragraph 5.4, and I hope you will agree that this is a very worthwhile endeavour that's been proposed here, and one that can be supported in terms of the relevant regulations. The implications are described in the report, Convener. Obviously the financial implications are the most significant, and the recommendations at paragraph 2 are to note the work that's been undertaken in relation to Arnott-Dale House, and to agree to lease the property to the Cyrenians at the reduced rate within the terms described in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to get an update report, and I'm really pleased to see how well the work is going with the refurbishment of the house, because I think that the Cyrenians, notwithstanding the previous work, this additional facility will bring an added value to our council area, and particularly in one of our core park areas. I think it's very much in keeping with our corporate priorities, and I think it fits very well with everything that council is trying to do in the direction of travel that we're going in. Had it not really been for the Cyrenians, we would have struggled to find another use for this particular building because of the constraints around the Common Good Fund. So I think this has given us an opportunity to bring a building back into use, and obviously look to have an income, albeit this isn't a commercial income, but as one of our key partners in delivering services on behalf of the council, it's appropriate that we look at that concession, but the Common Good Fund has been very pressured over the last number of years, so a £10,000 a year income would be very welcome to that, and again would benefit the wider area of Falkirk should there be any further applications to that. So I'm really pleased to see this progressing. I think it demonstrates our partnership, particularly with the third sector, and look forward to the facility coming to fruition and the activities that will take place as a result. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Senator.
Happy to second and reserve the right.
Right, thanks. Anyone any comments to make on that? No, maybe I could just give an update on the clock. The clock is now working. All we need is the hands, but we have got it working, 12 o'clock. So made a public appeal to Herald for it, but other than that, it can be a very skill job trying to get the hands and the right rates for it. So well, that's good news as well. So moving on, item 14, land surplus to requirements, Dixley, Old Coleman, and Main Street, Sensware.
Yes, this is a fairly standard report, a report in a standard format that members will be familiar with. We have identified two areas of ground which are not required by the council to deliver any of its services, and so there's no requirement to retain either of the sites. The first is a site in Old Polmont, which, as we see at paragraph 4.1, is part of a substantial field let under grazing licence for horses. The owner of the property, Beachley, has approached the council and requested that part of the site be acquired by them for the purposes of rearranging a stable block and the use of their garden. The site has been valued by the district valuer at £5,000, and it's suggested that it is disposed of to this applicant by negotiated agreement. The other site is in Main Street in Stenhousefield, and there's a photograph of the site together with a map in the appendix to the report. And this is a GAP site,
which is capable of redevelopment, and so the suggestion in this instance is that the site be offered on the market, put in the open market with a closing date for offers. In both cases, planning permission will be required, the first for a change of use and the second for any development that flows from that, and obviously that's a separate process, and any of the sales would presumably be conditional on planning permission for the change of for the uses being obtained. So the recommendations flow from that can be then contained in paragraph 2 of the report. Thank you.
Any of the council, or is it just Mr Alexander?
Yes, Convener, thanks very much. The report is quite straightforward, and I think the key part of the report is the fact that local members were consulted and all seem to be in agreement. Speak now for the whole of the piece. The issues again are quite straightforward, and I'm happy to move. This is obviously although it's subject to planning, there's no detriment to the application, either for or against, with regards to members taking part in this particular report, and also members of the planning committee. So with that, I'll formally move.
Okay, we'll agree that. Send the councillors agree? Agree. Yep. Okay, thanks for that. Next one is synthetic sports pitches. Mr Kearney.
Thanks again, Convener. Primarily provides an update on the development of the two 3G pitches at Bowness and Derry. Following the approval of council funding, both bids were successful in obtaining grants from Sport Scotland. Work was able to commence on the Derry pitch in June this year, with the work completed in September. Indeed, the official opening of the pitch just happened the other week. Unfortunately, the Bowness pitch will be delayed until 2019. Site investigations revealed a mine shaft near the pitch, and remedial works will be required to deal with this issue prior to starting the actual work on the 3G pitch. While the works could possibly be completed this year, the petition was discussed with the club, who felt it was better to postpone until 2019. Work will hopefully commence in the spring, with the pitch being available for the new football season. Gamelin Juniors have also expressed an interest in developing a 3G pitch. While there is no approved council funding to develop any further 3G pitches, the position of the club is noted, and council officers will provide, subject to the agreement of the executive, advice and support to obtain external funding. I just point out an error in the report at 5.1. There was no consultation with members as described, but none was required. Apologies for that. The recommendations are noted at section 2, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks for that. Councillor Spears want to speak to that report.
Are you calling me? It's just your microphone's on, I couldn't hear you. Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Committee. I think this is an excellent good news story. We have run into some problems along the way, especially in Bowness, where there is substantial mine workings in the locale. I think this showcases where we're hoping to go, especially with sports development within the Falkirk district area. It's been some time in the hatching, as they say, but it's good to see they're going ahead, and it will be interesting to see in the future if we can further develop this, especially with Caroline Junior.
Okay, thanks for that. Any comments or questions on it? Executive, would like to move it?
I'm happy to move the report, Convener. I think that we've seen the progress of the two pitches that has had funding, notwithstanding the difficulties in Bowness, is very positive, and that we are now seeking to extend similar support to Cameron Juniors, as demonstrating equity across the council area. So I look forward to seeing that develop with interest.
Yeah, I think I would like to second that, since I was born right across the road to Cameron Juniors and Fairley Drive. I hope that's acceptable. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Garvey.
Thank you, Convener. I'd just like to come in and actually thank a few people on behalf of both Dunny Pace FC and Newton Park Association. I know Newton Park aren't quite there yet, but Dunny Pace are, and it's an absolutely brilliant facility, one which I'm sure you can all come through and not probably play some of you, but certainly watch the teams on the surface. It's moving at speed at Dunny Pace. That's now up and running. There's other things that are going to progress, but I want to congratulate both committees. I know how much work I've put into this in the past 2.5, 3 years, and if you multiply that with any number you like, you'll see what kind of work they guys have put in, and I'm sure officers here will realise that as well, both Newton Park and Dunny Pace. But I'd also like to thank 4 officers, and the 4 officers I'd like to mention without their contribution has been immense, and that's Robin Millard, Michael McGowan, Ian Henderson, who has worked tirelessly, meeting after meeting, phone call after phone call, email after email, and without making them blush here, Danny Kearney has been amazing through this. I'm sure, as I said when I said the speech last week, Danny was through at the official opening, and I said to him I thanked them then, and I think they'll be happy to see this coming about, because I won't be polluting them any longer about it. So I would like to really thank all the officers, and it's been a great team effort. Well done, guys.
Anyone else? So then we'll move on to item 16. This is Guys again.
Thank you, Convener. This is the last in a series of reports that have been before members this morning, in relation to the economic regeneration of our area. And this one relates to the TIF initiative, which we mentioned already today. The TIF is well established. It's a very successful TIF initiative. I would venture to say the most successful one in Scotland. And its purpose is to provide enabling infrastructure to allow developments within our area but for that infrastructure would not have been able to come along. We've had the TIF now for 5 years, and there has been £6 million worth of infrastructure work already completed, with the balance of the project to be delivered in years to come in terms of the timetable. Talking of the timetable, an updated infrastructure programme is attached as Appendix 1 to the report. We need to constantly review the project. Obviously, we can't set a project that runs for many years without adjusting it, and this is the latest adjustment that we're suggesting. The changes are primarily to reflect the requirement for the crossing arrangements that will need to be put in place at the Westfield roundabout, and also to reflect the Gateway site enabling works. It's our intention to bring a report to members to the next meeting of this committee on the outcome of the Gateway bidding exercise, with a view to selection of a preferred developer moving forward. Firstly, turning to the Westfield crossing arrangements, as part of the TIF exercise and with a requirement to create additional road capacity in and out of Grangemouth, there is a need to upgrade and widen the A904, and particularly which is the junction of the roads at the Westfield roundabout. As a consequence of that will inevitably make it more difficult, more challenging for pedestrians to cross each of the 4 corners that meet the roundabout. And as we say at paragraph 422, we're seeing an average of 36,000 pedestrian movements alone across from Falkirk Stadium to Helix Park. And when you consider the proposals that will be coming forward for the development of the Gateway site, and particularly add to that the development of the new Forth Valley College campus, which you see is already rising out of the ground, you'll appreciate that all that's going to happen with these numbers is they will increase. and we're hoping that they will increase, because that means that there are more people moving back and forth across these key areas in our council area by more sustainable means other than vehicles. WSP, who are the council's consultants in relation to the project, have considered at great length how to effect a satisfactory arrangement to have pedestrians move across this area when you consider that they want to move from any corner to any corner. And they have returned to our original thinking in relation to this of an elevated crossing, a circular crossing, and there's an illustration of that contained in Appendix 3. The working title for this is the Westfield Ring, but we're looking for better names than that, so we'll maybe have to go and ask youngsters to think about how they might want to take that forward, because they're usually best for coming up with good names. The other element of the final element of the report I wish to bring to members' attention is associated with our Healthier Greener agenda and our low carbon vehicle hub, which I previously reported to members earlier this year. And there's a requirement to allow us to deliver the new PV canopy with the charging points, which obviously are sustainable energy, to pick up a point earlier made. That there's been in order to facilitate that, there was an excambion of land between ourselves and Falkirk Football Club. Since that decision was made by members, there's been further refinements undertaken to the plan, and the football club now they've adjusted their proposals and now require an additional piece of land, which is shown on the plan in the attached appendix. So turning back to the recommendations, Convener, the first recommendation is to note the progress and the adjustments, and agree the adjustments to the timetable of delivery of the plan, to agree the proposals in respect of the Westfield crossing, and to revise the ground lease as I've described with Falkirk Football Club. Thank you.
I thank Mrs Geiser for a very comprehensive report. It's a straightforward report, though, and it's something that I would hope would be approved unanimously. The issues relating to the traffic management at the Westfield roundabout are obviously very problematic. The current situation with the crossing itself is totally inadequate, and it does not serve the purpose that it was there for. The proposal that came forward, the suggestion that came forward in terms of almost a tourist attraction in itself, a roundabout management situation, is something that is, in principle, I think acceptable. But I must admit that the example that was quoted and given on page 229 came as something of a shock to the system, and as did the £10 million price tag. So I think that what we're looking for with this is a open up discussion with regards to the design works and the practicality of such a proposal. In relation to the football club, again, it's a very straightforward issue. It's about the relocation of a path. The club have announced they have grants secured from other sources that allows them to build a new synthetic pitch outside the main stadium complex at the east end of the development. That's something that I think will be welcomed by the community. Seem to wait forever on a pitch coming along, and all of a sudden we get four. That's something that is to be welcomed, and the change in the lease is relatively straightforward. So with that, I would formally move recommendations as contained in the general report on page 218.
Thanks for that. Second.
I'm happy to second for the unreserved.
Okay, thanks. Any questions or comments?
Just a quick comment. Obviously it is a very ambitious project, and you don't have to be young. I just think it looks like a witch's hat, does it no? But it's probably not the best name for it.
Yeah, that's what I thought we'd ask young
Oh, she thought she would ask young people.
Right.
Comparative. Mrs. Geisler, it's all comparative. The point I was going to make was, but I saw it in the report that it is covered, there have been questions asked about Junction 5, I call it the Klondike roundabout, about pedestrian access and things, but I'm assuming that that is work that's going to be starting shortly, because in your appendix it shows item 5 in 17-18, so we're kind of running out of time. The advanced works would be done on phase 1 for Junction 5. What's the situation with that?
There have been a number of issues, Colin knows more about it than I do, but there have been a number of issues, as I understand it, associated with infrastructure constraints, particularly around the Scottish Water utilities issues, which have meant that work's been rescheduled. But I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah.
The programme has to be fluid, the fund has to be fluid because of things like this that we might come across. But it certainly is been rescheduled. I know it's been rescheduled associated with those works that need to be done.
Yeah, I think there has been adjustments because of requirements from Scottish Water on what they need, and looking at relocating their mains pipe. We are now moving forward, and it will be just early in the new year that the works will start. There has been some advanced utility works carried out, but the main project will start in the new year.
And I take it that means, sorry, then following on from the back of that, the Ice House Bray is going to be held up as well. Then I take it that they're being done consequentially.
Yeah, Ice House Bray comes in at the end of the programme.
Yeah.
So it's, as far as I remember, 23, 24, is it?
There's provision in
Is it between financial years?
Right, okay, so it's a way back there. Okay,
Yeah.
I thought it was just in the back.
It's 23-24.
There is ownership issues around the Ice House Bray, which are under a CPO just now, and if they can be dealt with sooner rather than later, that could be pulled forward. So it's subject to that CPO.
Alright, okay, thanks very much.
Okay, anyone else just before I make a couple of comments on it? I'm delighted that the TIF has proved to be the success that it has, because it's bringing in 5 years, it's brought in £6 million, and of course that was one objective of the TIF, as well as getting the benefits for the community. The circle design, I mean, it is controversial, but I think the council's agreed it already. They agreed it when we brought it in, and it was discussed at that particular time, and it was met with approval. So I'm sure the more people look at it, they can all form their own opinion. On the TIF, I would like to say that Linda Gow and Craig Martin were prime movers in the TIF, and there was a stick about it at the time. That's life, and I think we should maybe record their gratitude to them. Traffic movement plan, though, is one that gives me a problem, which is, guys, like, if you move traffic quicker at the Westfield Stadium, which is pedestrian safety is important, no question about that, and it's a difficult junction. But then that moves the traffic quicker up to Lorison, and it moves the traffic quicker up the bypass, up past St Francis School, and up to Carlin Main Street. And that's where it's going to hit the real log jams. So I'm concerned that the movement of traffic up quicker there would cause these problems, perhaps at the Benny T roundabout, as I call it, at St Francis School, but principally at Carlin Main Street and the Beefeater roundabout. So we have some thought to factor that and then bring that report back to us on that.
Of course, the design, obviously the design of this is intended to help all traffic flow more effectively around our area. So certainly we can, there will be further reports come back to members, but I'm happy to provide you with any information that would be helpful to you and some of the detail around about the work that's been done around the traffic.
Especially at the school, Carmen and the Lorison.
Okay, we can take a note of that, we'll certainly get that for you.
Thanks for that. Anything else?
Yeah.
Mr. Alexander.
Yes, I don't think it actually increases the traffic. Well, it speeds it up at the areas that it's meant to speed up at, but the rest of it remains at the 30 or 40 miles an hour zones between the Roche Road and the school up to Lorison and to Tamworth. With regards to the TIF, we welcome the TIF. We don't recall the criticism that you've mentioned with the TIF. What we were critical of is the administration at that time missing the boat with regards to city region settlements, and that's something that is causing us major problems now. So that was the criticism that was levied. But the report itself, I think, highlights a number of initiatives which are well thought of. And I'd also like to thank the Scottish Government for their contribution, substantial financial contribution to the works that were undertaken. That was omitted from previous comments, but the Scottish Government, without the Scottish Government's endorsement of this particular programme, this could never have happened.
Okay. Anyone else? Well, Mr. Alexander's wound up. Okay. I'd like to thank the press and public for their attendance. Next time for the State and Private. Thanks for coming along.